Don't trade your soul for money. When the dream of wealth comes true. I once thought my first taste of success would come with champagne, jazz music, and someone raising a glass to toast my name. But real life had other plans. It happened on an ordinary Monday morning in a small cafe in downtown Austin, where the smell of toasted bread mixed with the ink from an old fax machine. Across the table, Mr. Harrison, old investor with snow-white hair and deep, calm eyes, slid a cream envelope toward me. Inside was a $50,000 check. No ceremony, no spotlight. But to me, it was Everest. I didn't grab it right away. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. In that moment, my mind went blank, not thinking about the product I'd just sold, not about the next plan, not even the consequences. There was only one line echoing in my head. I did it. I had lived in small, damp rooms. I'd spent nights reading an old Pascal book under a flickering yellow bulb. I'd been dismissed by teachers, mocked by peers for dreaming of selling software to the US before I turned 17. And now I had sold my first company, even if it was just a small startup building accounting tools. Someone was willing to pay $50,000 for it. If you've ever grown up with dry bread and tap water for breakfast, watched your mother count coins, worn your cousin's hand-me-down clothes, you'd understand how massive that moment felt. It wasn't just about the money. It was proof that I wasn't as worthless as they said, that those sleepless nights writing code, knocking on store doors to pitch my software, weren't in vain. I called my mother right after I left the cafe. I didn't mention the amount, just said, I signed a deal. Someone paid for my work. She was silent for a few seconds, then said softly, you deserve it, but don't let it blind you. I laughed. Back then, I thought she was just being cautious. How could I be blinded when the money was earned by my own hands? Later, I realized it wasn't the money that blinds us. It's the belief that money solves everything. That day, I walked home. The Texas sun was gentle, streets were buzzing, and I felt like I was floating. I stopped at a clothing store and bought a crisp white shirt and a navy blue tie. Not because I needed them, but because I wanted to feel like someone who belonged in a different world. Then I walked into a bookstore and bought 3 books I used to only read for free. How to Win Friends and Influence People, Think and Grow Rich, and a Hemingway novel. I wanted to step into the world of the successful, and now I believed I had the key. There's a dangerous kind of illusion, the belief that money opens every door. And at first, it seemed true. I was invited to more startup events. People looked at me differently. I got intros I'd never dreamed of, emails offering partnerships. I started showing up in places I used to walk past. Candlelit tables, red wine, conversations laced with vocabulary I hadn't learned yet. I didn't stop to ask, where am I going? Everything was moving too fast, too brightly. Every compliment was addictive. Every meeting felt like a passport to a bigger world. I began to think, if I could make $50,000, I could make $500,000, then maybe $5 million. No one told me, the higher you climb, the easier it is to forget why you started. I remember reading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, where he wrote, success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue as the unintended side effect of one's dedication to a cause greater than oneself. At the time, I didn't fully grasp it. I saw success as a destination, not the byproduct of a meaningful path. So, I began using money to change my surface better clothes, a new phone, a shiny used car. I still worked hard, still coded, but something inside had shifted. I no longer asked, "Who is this software for?" Instead, "How much can this project make?" Money, though still modest, started creeping into every decision. I accepted contracts I didn't care about because the price was right, skipped calls with old friends, believing we were no longer in the same league. The things that used to excite me, discovering new code, sharing ideas with student forums, no longer moved me. I started losing touch with what had sparked this journey. Sometimes, early success is a sweet curse. The one who thought money could fix everything. I used to believe that if I had enough money, I'd never feel insecure again. No more awkward silences in crowds. No more waking up uncertain of what to eat or where to go. No more bowing my head to ask for help. So, right after the deal with Mr. Harris, I began upgrading my life. First, I left the musty old room and moved into a small studio apartment downtown where sunlight poured through the windows and the toilet actually flushed. I bought a new computer, Italian leather shoes, and a shiny black used car I'd once admired from behind showroom glass. I called it investing in myself. But really, I was trying to erase the traces of the broke Victor. I started showing up at young tech meetups not as a scrappy kid hoping to learn, but as the guy who sold his first startup. People looked at me differently. Some asked for advice, others invited me to collaborate. For the first time in my life, I walked into a room full of strangers and felt welcomed. I began to think, maybe, just maybe, if you have money, or at least look like you do, everything becomes easier. Admiration, opportunities, relationships, all of it opened faster. When someone who grew up lacking suddenly has money, the instinct is to overcompensate. I started buying what I never dared to dream of. A glimmering mechanical watch, a plane ticket I didn't price check, a French dinner ordering without looking at the right-hand column. I didn't realize I was making up for more than material lack. I was filling emotional voids too. I wanted to be respected, to be remembered, to walk into a room and no longer be the quiet guy in the corner. Money felt like magic. I began thinking, if I could buy attention, maybe I could buy trust. If I could buy admiration, maybe I could buy love. If I could pay people to work for me, maybe I could buy a sense of purpose. I remember one time, during a post-talk Q&A, a freshman asked me, "Why did you start your company?" I laughed and answered quickly, "To change how small businesses manage finances." But in my head, the real answer was, to escape poverty. I no longer remembered why I started. When I built that first tool, I wanted to help the corner store guy manage inventory. But now, all I cared about was, how big will the next payout be? When you use money to patch emotional holes, the void only grows. I started depending on other people's gazes, hours choosing the right shirt for a conference, saying what I thought investors wanted to hear. Slowly, I began shaping myself to fit expectations rather than values. No one forced me to change, but in my hunger to be accepted, I stepped away from who I was. I recall a quote from James Baldwin: "You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read." Back then, I hadn't read much, but had I read, I might have known. Others had fallen into this trap too. They thought money would heal, but learned it only offered temporary relief. I won't lie, money made things easier, but what I failed to see was, I'd started confusing value with affordability. I began putting money into relationships, paying for dinners, gift 7 moments that should have been rooted in sincerity. I thought I was giving, but really, I was buying. Everything still looked fine on the outside. But one day, flipping through my journal, I realized something. No more entries about philosophy, ideals, or coding to help others. Just numbers. Money earned, targets set, comparisons made. The warning from Mr. Harris that was ignored. I met Mr. Harris again just weeks after the deal. I was still riding the high of being a new success, as if the world was now mine for the taking. No extra effort required. We sat in a small whiskey bar near the old docks in Austin, the kind he liked to frequent on weekends. No loud music, no designer furniture, just wooden tables, cheap scotch, and real conversations. He poured me a glass, looked me in the eye, and said slowly, "Victor, you've got fire in your eyes, but remember, that first dollar you earn, it's always the one that tempts you off course." I chuckled, a light laugh, the kind only the young and overly confident can manage. "I get it, but I've got it under control this time." He didn't flinch, just shook his head, slowly, calmly. It's when you think you're in control that you stop seeing the slope. I nodded, as if I was taking his wisdom in, but deep down I thought, he belongs to another era. I'm part of something new. What I didn't realize was this: the moment you think others don't understand you is the moment you stop learning. That day, Mr. Harris told me about an old friend of his who'd built a successful business in retail software. Just like me, that guy made a big payout early on. Then came the real estate deals, restaurants, even a film investment. He never lost money, but he lost track of why he started. Now he's got 3 houses, but when I asked him, "Do you still enjoy coding?" he couldn't answer. I gave a half smile, shrugged. "I'm different." He set his glass down, sighed deeply. "I hope so." That line, I dismissed it then, but it would echo in my head over and over again after each misstep. We often think those who came before us are preaching, but some words, if heard at the right moment, can save years of wandering. I left the bar that night with a head full of plans. I had the money. Now I just needed influence. I wanted more, faster. I didn't have the patience to listen to lectures on balance or purpose. There was a naive but dangerous belief forming in me. I'll be the exception. I'll be rich and I'll stay grounded. But no one told me. Staying grounded isn't a promise you make, it's the pauses you take to examine yourself in silence. I didn't pause. Soon after, I was attending bigger events. I got invited to speak at my first tech conference. As I stepped onto that stage, lights in my face, applause ringing strangely, I thought of Mr. Harris. And in that moment, his words came back. "Don't trade your soul for money." I didn't trade it, not deliberately, but I began renting it piece by piece. Each time I said something I didn't believe, just to get a nod. Each project I took for profit, not impact. Each silence I kept when I saw something wrong, just to protect an opportunity. Those were small leases on my soul. And one day, I could no longer remember what it looked like in its original form. Later, I didn't recall Mr. Harris's words through memory. I recalled them through pain, when money lost its magic, when successful projects felt hollow, when I had everything but nothing felt truly mine. People say, the best lessons come late, but I disagree. I think the best lessons are the ones we were told early, but chose to ignore. Money buys attention, not purpose. I started getting more invitation stack talks, startup panels, even a short radio interview. At just 20 years old, people saw me as if I'd walked straight out of the American Dream playbook, from poverty, seizing opportunity, earning money, gaining respect. I didn't reject it, didn't find it strange. On the contrary, I grew used to it. Eventually, I expected it. Every time someone asked for a photo, every time I was introduced as a promising young mind, I felt a little more important. At first, it was healthy pride. But slowly, it turned into a subtle dependency on others' approval. I no longer coded out of curiosity or passion. I coded to impress, to create the next talked about product. No one made me do it, but I drifted without realizing. I began dismissing projects that didn't promise instant recognition. I dropped an idea for a small pharmacy inventory tool too. Quiet, not media-worthy. Instead, I jumped into building a restaurant reservation, even though I knew nothing about hospitality. Why? Because it was trending. My sense of purpose began to fade. I used to want to build tools for people like my parents to help them live with more ease. But with money came amnesia. All I cared about was going faster, farther, no matter if the direction was still right. Once, while speaking at a high school, a student asked, "How do you know you're doing the right thing?" I froze. That should have been easy to answer. But deep down, I wasn't sure anymore. I smiled and said, "Just keep going and trust you're on the path." It sounded good, but it wasn't real. Here's a hard truth. You can work hard, build products, get recognition, and still have no real purpose. I know that because I lived it. At the time, I started living like everything was settled. I shopped more, traveled more, and most importantly, I distanced myself from everything that reminded me of where I came from. I avoided talking about my parents, avoided my old neighborhood, not because I hated it, but because it made me ashamed of who I was becoming. I knew something felt off, but I couldn't name it. I was still getting applause, still getting invites, still seeing money hit the bank. But in the quiet of the night, no stages, no audience, I started feeling an emptiness. Not pain, not even confusion, just a soft sense that something's missing. I tried filling it with new plans, new projects, new people, but nothing stuck. Back then, I didn't understand, but now I know. Purpose isn't something you declare. It lives quietly in the way you work, Kevin, when no one's watching. I once read a line in David Brooks' The Road to Character. Resume virtues are the skills you bring to the marketplace. Eulogy virtues are the ones they talk about at your funeral. At the time, I was living entirely for resume virtues, the things that help me shine on paper, in meetings, on stages. But deep inside, the eulogy virtues, the things loved ones remember when you're gone, were fading. Money can buy stages, it can buy lights, it can buy attention, but it can't buy the reason you keep going when no one's watching. I thought I was rising, but in truth, I was drifting without a compass. I didn't see it then, but I'd pay dearly to learn it later. The choice between easy money and lasting value. I used to believe every opportunity should be seized, especially when you've just made your first real money and escaped poverty's shadow. That feeling makes you believe there are no limits now. And truth be told, after selling my first startup, doors began opening. Someone invited me to invest in a futuristic cafe chain with AI that remembered customer tastes. Another pitched a Tinder for roommates. The profits sounded tempting. I wasn't passionate about any of them, but then a voice crept in. If you don't do it, someone else will, and they'll get rich. What about you? That push didn't come from purpose. It came from fear of being left behind. I saw peers posting photos with VCs, attending events in Silicon Valley, talking Series A funding, and meet the guy once called the software prodigy. What was I doing? Quietly writing code? Taking on small contracts? I wouldn't settle for that. So I plunged into things that seemed profitable without asking whether they were truly worth doing. I agreed to be an advisor for a speed dating app. They didn't need my tech skills, just my name, to boost investor confidence. I knew it wasn't honest. But I thought, it's just my name. What harm could it do? I also put money into a freelance gig platform even, though I knew the model wasn't new. But the pitch decks, the projected growth curves, the glossy slides made me silence my instincts. Each decision seemed reasonable, but looking back, I see a pattern. I kept choosing easy money over real value. The strange thing was, the more I earned, the more directionless I felt. My mind split in 10 directions, every project half done, nothing deep, all surface. I started sleeping less, waking up in the middle of the night to check emails. Every call brought a new pitch, and I'd think, I can't miss this. I have to be everywhere. I lived like that for months. On the outside, I looked successful, but inside, something was unraveling. I couldn't remember the last time I coded out of joy. Couldn't recall the thrill of learning something new. Each day, I was a guest at a buffet. Everything, but never full. Then one day, I received an email from an old teacher, the man who taught me basic programming in 11th grade. He wrote, "Victor, don't let speed pull you away from depth. The boy who once obsessed over fixing a single line of code is still alive, if you're quiet enough to hear him." I shut the screen. Saturday still. For some reason, that line hit Minot with pain, but with clarity. I began sitting down, reviewing every project, crossing out the ones that didn't fit, messaging teams to bow out, canceling future deals. I needed space to think, and for the first time in months, I asked myself, if no one saw me, no applause, no bonuses, no spotlight, would I still want to do this? The answer chilled me. I realized I'd been choosing ease over essence, and if I kept going, I'd lose myself. I didn't turn around instantly, but for the first time, I began doubting the path I was on. You might think, well, just stop then. But it's not that simple. Once you've taken investor money, made promises, become part of teams, you can't just walk away like nothing happened. I was caught between two forces, growing recognition and a small, persistent voice inside whispering, "This isn't who you are." Later, I realized this was the start of an invisible fracture. Not loud enough to break me yet, but strong enough to shake my core. You can keep walking with doubt, but you can't go far. Short-term success is a trap for the future. Success that comes too quickly is like a strong wind, flashy, powerful, but without foundation. And if you're not grounded, it sweeps you away before you even know where you're going. I wasn't a millionaire. I didn't own a billion-dollar startup at 20. What I had was social recognition, and to a young man, that sometimes feels sweeter than money. The applause, the invitations, the name on event posters, those things are more addictive than we like to admit. but the sweetness made me blind. I began working with the mindset that everything will work out. I handed off projects without double-checking, signed contracts I didn't fully read, promised clients more than we could deliver. And when someone voiced concerns, I'd say, "Don't worry, it'll be fine." Why was I so confident? Because so far, things had worked out. Because I believed I had the magic touch. But I forgot something crucial. A good result doesn't mean it was the right path. Some projects were clearly off track, but I said yes because they promised quick returns. Some partners I didn't fully trust, but I shook hands anyway. I was building a tower on sand. It looked great, but it had no foundation. Every time a deal closed, I didn't celebrate. I looked for the next one. Every article written about me, I didn't care about the content, just the headline. Young entrepreneur, code prodigy, one to watch? My ideals had morphed into a personal brand. I lived as if I were racking up points every mention, a new badge. Then one day, I realized I couldn't even remember why I wrote my first line of code. It wasn't for deadlines. It wasn't for money. It was for curiosity. I used to spend hours fixing a tiny bug to make a store owner's life easier. Now I debugged just to meet deadlines. In one meeting, a young team member said bluntly, "I don't understand why we're building this. It doesn't help anyone." The room went silent. I felt annoyed, but then I asked myself, if even my own team doesn't know why we're doing this, what are we really doing? I smiled, tried to salvage it. The market needs it. The opportunity is big. Purpose will come later. I knew I was lying, but I didn't want to admit it. And that's the biggest trap. Using short-term success to justify long-term compromise. I was becoming the kind of person I used to dislike, always rushing, always calculating, always thinking about the bottom line first. I didn't realize that every small compromise, every half-truth I accepted, was laying the foundation for a life I'd later struggle to untangle. I still had time to stop, but I didn't. Because I thought I was winning. No one told me this. Success isn't what you have. It's who you become after you get it. And by then, I was becoming someone else entirely. No longer working for purpose, only for profit. I used to believe that no matter how far I went, I'd hold on to my original purpose. That no matter how much money I made, I'd stay grounded in my values. But no one told me this. Purpose doesn't preserve itself. It must be protected daily. And I didn't protect it. I no longer woke up with ideas that made me excited. I woke up for deadlines, for investor emails, for prepping keynote slides. Work wasn't part of life anymore. It was life, and a directionless one. My calendar was full, my bank account was growing, but I still felt hollow. I didn't know what I was working for anymore. One afternoon, I sat alone in a familiar Austin cafe, laptop open, to-do list beside a cold espresso. Around me, everyone was busy, but I felt detached. I pulled up an old code file, the warehouse management software I wrote at 17 for a neighborhood shop. The syntax was outdated, the UI clunky. But reading it, I felt nostalgic. Back then, I stayed up until 3 a.m. polishing the print report function. Not because I had to, but because I knew the shop owner would use it every day. I wanted it to work smoothly. I wanted to make their life easier. Now, I built flashy apps with thousands of downloads but helped no one in any meaningful way. I called it product building. But deep down, I knew I was just Making money. No one forced me to change. No one told me to chase profit. But decision by decision, compromise by compromise, I became someone else. Making money isn't wrong, but when money becomes your only reason, you slowly lose the sense that your work matters. I began noticing the numbness in how I operated. When a team member shared a personal issue, my only concern was, will it affect the deadline? When someone pitched a non-market-friendly idea, I shot it down before listening. I used to be someone who paused and listened. Not anymore. Now I measured everything in ROI, traffic, churn rate. Worse still, I myself no longer believed in the products I was making. I just needed them to get downloads, to make money. Purpose became nothing more than a word on a pitch deck to win investor trust. Once you disconnect from purpose, work turns into a cold machine. No emotion, no inspiration. I remembered telling a young mentee, do meaningful work and money will follow. But I was doing the opposite, chasing money, then convincing myself it was meaningful. I'd gone too far to notice, because every step I took was praised by others. Society celebrates those who earn big, but few ask, where did the money come from? And for what purpose? That question haunted me. Every time I looked inward, I saw a man losing his empathy, his ability to feel what was right. And eventually, I feared I was becoming someone my 15-year-old self would never respect. When you sell your purpose, emptiness is what remains. For a while, I lived like a money-making machine, efficient, relentless, predictable. My calendar was booked solid. Every week, I flew to a different city. Investment meetings, contract signings, tech talks, one after another. On the outside, I was the definition of success, but inside, I was losing my connection to myself. At a startup event in Chicago, I was invited to speak in front of over 300 people. Fancy venue, stage lights illuminating my face from every angle. But when I stepped up to the mic, I forgot what I was going to say. I stood there, silent. Just a few seconds, but inside, chaos. I scanned the crowd, trying to remember why I even accepted this invite. Was it to inspire, or just to be seen? There was no answer. After that speech, I went back to my hotel. Didn't talk to anyone. In my room, I sat in silence for hours. No phone, no emails, no to-do list. For the first time in months, I was alone with myself. And the first feeling that surfaced was emptiness. Not sadness, not exhaustion, just empty, like everything inside me had been replaced by a polished, performative version of who I used to be. I thought back to the first time I touched a computer, that old, half-broken machine the school was going to throw away. I didn't know a thing about coding, but I was curious. Watching lines appear on screen felt like magic. I felt alive. Now I typed every day for reports, investor emails, pitch decks, but felt nothing. I had sold something without knowing it, and now that I realized, I didn't know how to get it back. I started having strange dreams. I'd be on stage, but the audience slowly vanished. I'd be giving a speech, but no one was listening. I'd signed contracts, but there was no one on the other side of the table. I'd wake up, still smiling, still putting on the suit, still attending the events. But deep down, I knew I was living inside a shell. And purpose, the fire that once pulled me forward, was now just a bullet point in marketing decks. Once, at a fancy dinner, An older investor asked, "What are you most proud of in the last 3 years?" I almost answered, but the words stuck. I didn't know. Honestly, I didn't know. I'd done a lot, achieved a lot, but I didn't feel anything about it. And that's when I realized, when you trade purpose for success, what you receive isn't joy, it's a haunting, hollow ache. No one warned me that the worst thing isn't failure. It's success without anyone beside you and nothing inside you. I don't know what to call that feeling. Not depression, but not contentment either. It's like walking through fog. You're moving, but you're not sure if it's in the right direction. I used to think purpose was something you held in your heart, but really purpose is something you choose every single day with small intentional actions. And when you stop choosing it, you don't notice the loss right away. But over time, decision by decision, you lose it without knowing. Until one day, you wake up and realize you're living a life that no longer feels like yours. Not yet awake enough to see the wrong turn. If you've ever been lost in the woods, you'll know this feeling. Nothing feels immediately dangerous, but everything looks the similarly so. Every tree feels familiar. Every path seems right. And before you know it, you're going in circles. That was me. I sensed something was off inside, but my mind always found a reason to keep going. Not tired enough to stop. No real failure yet, so no need to fix anything. Just keep moving, I'll find my purpose again. That's what I told myself day after day, even though deep down I knew I was drifting. People ask, if you felt empty, why didn't you stop? The honest answer, because people were still praising me. Around me, I was being called a new generation icon. The media praised me. Investors kept coming. Friends asked for financial advice. And my ego, fragile but greedy, couldn't let go of feeling important. I wasn't addicted to money. I was addicted to validation. Every time I got a speaking invite, I felt useful. Every message that said, "You inspire me," gave a momentary high, but a few minutes later, the emptiness returned. And to fill that void, I took on more contracts, more projects, more noise, things that made me busy, but didn't help me know myself. It's the quietest addiction, needing to feel like you're doing something important. I once believed, if I stay busy, I won't feel empty. But in truth, busyness is the easiest way to ignore emptiness. No one made me chase the pace. But I kept going, not because I couldn't see the problem, but because I wasn't ready to face it. Some nights, I'd sit alone in a rented apartment downtown. Outside the window, city lights blinked, cars flew past. I felt like I was standing in a world that never stopped, and I had to keep moving or be left behind. So I moved, not out of conviction, but out of fear. Fear that if I stopped, I'd see the emptiness in full. Fear that if I stopped, I'd have to admit I'd gone the wrong way. I started replacing direction with speed. If it's fast, it must be good. If I'm busy, I must be valuable. If people cheer, I must be right. But if someone had asked me, "Where are you going?" I couldn't have answered. I didn't want to stop, but I didn't know where I was headed. That's the most dangerous state, not when you're wrong, but when you're not awake enough to realize it. Then one night, I sat writing a financial report. It was past midnight, coffee cold, eyes blurry. I opened an old journal I'd written at 17. I want to build software that helps poor families manage money better. I stared at that line for a long time. No sadness, no regret, just distance, as if it had been written by someone else. A version of May who once lived honestly. Easy money always comes with a high cost. I didn't realize what I was losing until the cost started showing up. Quietly, gradually, but unmistakably. At the time, I was still succeeding. My bank account was healthy. Invitations to speak kept coming. Clients lined up. But in still moments, a feeling pierced through. I was paying with something deeply human inside me. And the longer I avoided it, the heavier the price became. First came the emotional numbness. I no longer felt joy signing new deals, no pride finishing a product. Every money transfer became just another notification, a heartbeat skipped. Success without purpose turns into a dry sequence of results. Money arrived, praise arrived, but I felt nothing. Then came exhaustion. I didn't call it burnout, but my body knew. Blurred vision, foggy mind, broken sleep. Some mornings I woke up feeling worse than before I went to bed. One day, I stared at my screen, not even remembering what I was writing. And I asked myself, am I running fast just so I don't have to face myself? No one pressured me. I had built this machine, and I had no idea how to turn it off. Then came disconnection. I drifted from old friends, ignored their texts, skipped hangouts. Not because I was too busy, but because I didn't know what to say anymore. I feared the question, so, what are you up to these days? Because I didn't know how to answer honestly without feeling ashamed. I distanced from family too. My mother would call, asking, "Are you eating okay?" I'd reply bluntly, "I'm fine, don't worry." But the truth? I lived off cold sandwiches and takeout. Money, what I once believed would free me, had become the reason I was alone. To keep the money, I had to stay busy. To keep the image, I had to fake being okay. To keep the praise, I had to say things I didn't believe. And slowly, I couldn't tell who I really was anymore. That's the heaviest cost. Losing your ability to notice you're not being real. One night, riding a cab home from the airport after an event in Seattle, it started to rain. Streetlights blurred across the windshield. The driver asked, "So, what do you do?" I paused, then said, "I work in tech." The answer felt hollow, because I knew it was just a label. I didn't really know what I did anymore. I once wanted to help people live better through software. Now, I just made things that sold. Even profit didn't excite might, just fueled the ever-growing machine. The cost wasn't losing everything overnight. It was losing myself, piece by piece, through choices that seemed normal. A harmless lie. A contract signed without reading. A pitch I didn't believe in but called promising. They stacked up until one day you can't recognize how far you've drifted, and you no longer know where you're going. I once believed money brings freedom, but the truth is, easy money always comes with a high cost if you don't know why you're earning it. And at that point, I had no idea. I'd become a hollow version of myself, smiling on stage, dressed sharp, repeating lines like a machine. Behind that smile was a man too tired to stop.
My dad once told me, the most dangerous thing isn't doing the wrong thing. It's doing the right thing with a soul that's already lost itself. At 20, he earned the kind of money most people only dream of, but the price he paid wasn't financial, it was internal. Each wrong step didn't break him, but slowly pulled him away from who he really was. And the scariest part? He didn't even notice. This video isn't saying money is bad. It's asking, have you held on to the reason why you started? If you're moving too fast, maybe pause. Ask yourself, if no one saw me, would I still want to do this? Thank you for listening to this part of my father's journey. If any part of it resonated with you, leave a comment or share it with someone who may be running too fast, forgetting where they began. Hello everyone, I'm Lily, the youngest daughter of Victor Dominic. My father shared these stories, not to be remembered, but to remind us. Everyone deserves a new beginning, even the broken ones. Some names and places have been changed for privacy, but Free Your Soul is real, and it's the most precious legacy he left us. Today, I'm sharing it with you, hoping it reaches someone who needs a quiet, gentle whisper. Thank you for listening with your heart. I'll see you in the next stories.